فلا تطع المكذبين ودوا لو تدهن فيدهنون.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Tony. I was born into a Christian family, and many of my family members are ministers or pastors or involved with the church in some way. Although my country is very beautiful, there's also a lot of problems with it. For example, crime. A woman is raped every 2 minutes, according to statistics. Every 2 minutes, a woman would be raped. Now the Christians in the churches would teach the people that the shaitan created the religion of Islam and that it was an evil religion. The media and everybody seemed to hate the Muslims, and this idea was propagated through our society. But I did not hate the Muslims. I wanted to guide the Muslims to the straight path and show them that they should not worship any rock or any man or any created thing. Now, could you imagine me telling a Muslim that? Now, at this time, I didn't really understand my religion very well, so I wanted to study it. And I was raised to believe in the Trinity, and so I worshiped the Trinity out of ignorance. This is the way my parents taught me to do. See, I was born into the strongest sect of Christianity in my country. These are known as the Baptists, and they believe in the Trinity very strongly. But for some reason, it just didn't feel good for me to do this. But I just followed along because this is what I was taught to do. So I began to read the Bible, and I wanted to learn my religion so I could teach it to others and teach it to the Muslims. But when I read the Bible, I was shocked. I couldn't believe what is in the Bible. I was surprised that every prophet came with the same message, that there is no God except for the one true God, and that you should worship Him alone. None of the prophets taught about a Trinity, not even a single one. They all came with the same message. They all came with the message of oneness of God. For example, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." Exodus chapter 34, verse 14, "For you shall worship no other God." Mark chapter 12, verse 29, "And Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." Matthew chapter 4, verse 10, "Then said Jesus unto him, Go away, Satan, for it is written, You shall worship the Lord your God, and Him only shall you serve." I was also shocked to see the method of prayer of the way the prophets, the way they prayed. When I was young, I was taught to pray like this, with my hands together, looking up to the sky. This is the way I was taught to pray, sitting on a chair, just putting your hands together like this. This is the way I was taught to pray. But when I was reading the Bible, I saw that the prophets, they fell on their face to pray in submission to God. For example, Genesis 17, verse 3, "And Abraham fell on his face." Numbers chapter 16, verse 4, "And when Moses heard it, he fell on his face." 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 41, "David arose out of a place toward the south, and fell on his face to the ground." 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 18, "And Jehoshaphat bowed his head with his face to the ground, and all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem fell before the Lord, worshiping the Lord." Matthew 26, verse 39, "And he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed." Revelations 7, verse 11, "And all the angels stood around about the throne and fell before the throne on their faces and worshipped God." And I also read in the Bible about fasting. Matthew chapter 4 verse 2. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterwards hungry. Mark 2 chapter 18. And the disciples of John and of the Pharisees used to fast. Matthew 6 verse 18. Moreover, when you fast, be not as the hypocrites of a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear unto men to fast. Matthew 6 verse 17. But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face. So as a Christian, we weren't even taught that we should fast. This wasn't even something that the church leaders even taught us to do. And not only this, but in the Bible it talks about the Hajj. In Psalms 84 verse 65, Blessed is the man whose strength is in you, who sets their heart on pilgrimage as they pass through the valley of Mekkah. Genesis 47 verse 9, And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. You see, if the Christians were following their Bible, they would be so similar to the Muslims, and they would not hate the Muslims, but instead they turn their backs on their own book. They don't even believe in their own book. Instead they teach something different. If only the Christians would follow their own book, they would believe in the oneness of God. They would pray by prostrating. They would give charity. They would fast. And they would go to the Hajj, inshallah. Now when I read the Bible, I was also disgusted at what I found. I was horrified because of the lies in it. For example, in the Old Testament, there's a story about Jacob, how he has a wrestling match with God, and he beats up God. He wins. He is superior in strength to God. Now how can I believe that? Another good example is in the Bible. It says that God sleeps. How could God sleep? Psalms 44 verse 23. Awake, why do you sleep, O Lord? Psalm 78 verse 65. Then the Lord awakened as one out of sleep, and like a mighty man that shouts by reason of wine. How dare anybody utter these lies against God? So how could I believe in the Trinity when none of the prophets believed in the Trinity and none of the prophets taught about the Trinity? How could I believe in it? So I went to my family and I told them I do not believe in the Trinity because none of the prophets did. And so they arranged for me to meet with one of my family members who is a minister. And I debated with him and I said, I want to see where in the Bible does it say there's a Trinity. There's nowhere in the Bible. It doesn't say that anywhere. And the proofs he gave were very, very weak. And finally he became so angry with me that I wouldn't just believe it. But I just wanted to have the proof for it. I still wanted to prove the Muslims wrong though, because I was believing what the media was telling me. I was brainwashed by the media. The media says that the Muslims worship a black rock. They worship the Prophet. They worship the moon. They do all these kinds of evil things. They oppress the weak. They are cruel to them. They are cruel to old people. They are cruel to women. This is what the media is teaching. They are even cruel to each other, their own brothers. This is what the media is teaching, and I was believing it. So I went to the mosque and I wanted to buy a Quran, a translation of a Quran. And so I went there and they gave it to me for free. And I had some questions, so I asked him a few questions. But then I went home and I started studying very, very hard. I'd study for hours and hours to try and find mistakes in the Quran and find problems with their religion, but I wasn't able to find any. Any problems I found were easily explained. And the first thing that I wanted to know about this Prophet of Islam, was he rich or was he poor? because I thought that maybe he was only doing it for money. So I thought, okay, is he rich or was he poor? And I found out that he was wealthy first, and then he became poor after he began to deliver the message. And even after he began to deliver the message, they came and offered him money, but he refused it. So after I read the Quran, I knew that if there was any message from my Lord, that this was the message. And so I went to the Imam and I took the Shahada. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu an Muhammadan Rasulullah. And one of the greatest gifts that you have is that you are born into this religion of Islam. So do not turn your backs on it like the Christians have turned their backs on their religion. If only they would follow their book, they would be similar to the Muslims. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
ولا تطع كل حلاف مهين هماز مشاء بنميم